and I've already got my screen share on, so you should be able to see it. I've got the Chapter 10 slide deck pulled up. So this evening, I want to talk to you a little bit about we're in week 6, and so looking ahead, we've got next week, and then week 8 is a short week. So remember that. So I'm going to cover a variety of things during this Zoom session, just kind of make sure we're on the right track and everyone uh, understands the remaining assignments we have in this class, and we'll finish up strong. So, wanted to start off in week 6. You'll see there is chapter 10 slide deck. So, I just wanted to talk a little bit briefly this evening about intelligence, how we come up with IQ score, and then also a little bit about adaptive behavior and adaptive behavior scales that we do. A lot of times you might be asked to complete some adaptive behavior skills, especially on initial testing, and that is the questionnaire protocols that we send home. One is designated for the teacher, one is designated for the parent, and it all is a series of questions throughout that adaptive behavior document, asking how that particular student adapts and performs specific skills in that environment, whether it's school or at home. So we're going to go through this quickly, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the CBM assignment, and then also a brief overview of the mock IEP. So looking at intelligence, so basically it's just a general concept of an individual's ability to function. And to function effectively in various settings. And so we usually assess that with intelligence test. Okay, the WIS-5 is a very popular IQ test that's often administered. And then we talk about adaptive behaviors. And basically, as I mentioned, that's an individual's ability to function in various environments, performing just basic everyday skills. So the meaning of intelligence testing, basically we report that in a what we call a standard intelligence quotient, or IQ. We all have heard IQ. What's the IQ for this student? And when we look at that, it usually has a mean of 100. So if we had a bell curve, 100 would be right in the middle. Okay. So basically, the quotient or the formula to calculate that, if you were to do it by hand, is we're going to take the student's mental age, or individual, could be an adult. We're going to take their mental age, divide it by their chronological age, and then we're going to multiply it by 100. Okay. Very seldom will you ever have to do any of that by hand. If you get into the testing side of this, software will do it for you, but it kind of gives you an idea how that works, what the formula is. Common myth: IQ scores are measurements of potential that is innate in a person. IQ does not measure ability. Okay, another myth. Intelligence testing is simply the way that a student responds to a set of stimuli at a specific point in time. Okay, so we've all heard that. Some facts or debates, things that have come up over time regarding IQ testing. There's often been some heated debates over that. So some of the questions are the theories upon which the tests are based and how they may influence the use of the test, and also how they're interpreted. Okay. It's important that formal assessment measures are free from any type of ethnic, cultural, and linguistic bias. We talked a little bit about that last week when we talked about norm reference. Some common issues include using IQ alone by itself as an indicator for special education. Okay, that's an issue often we run across. We want to use more than just an IQ score. Okay, we don't, and also we don't want to rely on just one piece of data either. It's good to look at the whole picture of the student. Also, another issue is of learned behaviors, and then we look at innate potential, and that's when we look at it's a thought to be one's ability from birth. Other issues are environmental influences. Okay, the impact of the environment on the student's ability to learn. We know that definitely impacts a student, right? If you look at a student that comes from severe poverty, if they're in that environment, fall under the poverty level, oftentimes we know that those families lack any type of educational resources in the home, right? So therefore those students come to us at school already behind compared to a student of similar age that comes from a um, student of a different socioeconomic status to where there are multiple educational resources in the home, there are books, the parents read to them. Big difference. Also, another issue is acculturation, and basically that's the influence of one's culture on another culture. Issues with IQ testing, okay? Just in the creation of the test alone, oftentimes we have issues with content validity, construct validity, how it's constructed, predictive validity, and then the mean differences obtained by different groups. Okay, those are some issues with the creation of it. Then we have biased issues. Could be inappropriate content on that assessment when we're doing the IQ assessment, an inappropriate standardization sample, examiner language bias, inequitable social consequences, different measures of construct, differential predictability, and then we have some qualitatively distinct minority and majority aptitude and personality differences. Okay, a lot of that you're probably never going to even get into, but it's kind of interesting to see some of the issues with some of the different assessments and why, again, going back to the earlier slide, why it's imperative that we don't just rely on an IQ score to make a decision on placing that student in special education. There's been litigation over time since IQ testing came to inception. Here are some court cases. I won't sit here and just read all that to you. You can go back to it and look at it as a reference, but there are some interesting court cases and litigation involving IQ testing. Okay, and a lot of it goes back and it's all focused around um, different cultures. Okay, when we give it to someone that has a different cultural background, that tends to cause issues. So we need to keep that in mind as well when we're looking at IQ testing. There are also other means or methods, alternative use of intellectual assessments. Some of these you might be familiar with. Howard Gardner has been popular through time, going back to 93 when we had the seven intelligences. Okay, so Gardner's a popular one. Then in '05 we had Carroll, who came up with the three strata of intelligence, have an overarching intelligence, and then there's a level two, focusing on specific abilities. And then level three on very specific. We have dynamic assessment, and it uses assessment to experience, or an assessment experience to measure the task of learning. Examiner is able to help the learner in this. It's more of a performance based. It also views the ceiling as an area of functioning that warrants assessment. So, kind of going back to the basal and ceiling term. Another alternative method is cross-battery assessment, and so that's administering subtests from two or three more tests to determine if weaknesses exist in a particular skill or ability. This practice right there, cross-battery assessment, is not uncommon to do. Okay. If a school psychologist or a school psychometrist comes in, you may see them use uh, a component from the WJ4, a component from the WIS 5, and then they'll have an adaptive behavior, maybe the Vinland 3, to come up with their overall comprehensive report. So it's not uncommon to pull subtests from more than one source, okay, during the testing process. Use of intelligence test. Okay, IQ testing tends to remain still somewhat controversial because of the inappropriate uses in the past and over time. There have been changes, there are improvements that have been made. It is also likely to remain a part of the assessment process because what is assessed by the IQ test correlates to school performance. Okay, so a lot of the tests that we give, formalized tests, is going to provide us some kind of a IQ score or general intellectual inability score, often referred to as a GIA. We get that with the WJ4. So, also want to make sure it promotes fair and appropriate use of the test. We don't want to just administer it just to give it. We want to make sure it's promoted fairly and it's used appropriately for the intent that it was designed. Here are some guidelines for appropriate uses of IQ test. Um, Talks about emphasizing prevention and early intervention rather than eligibility determination. Okay, so we want to make sure that we've done plenty of intervention services and opportunities before we can get to that point of just giving an IQ test. And an intellectual assessment should not be used when the results are directly relevant to well-defined referral questions. Okay, so we want to make sure that they don't have any knowledge beforehand of the different type of question formatting or questions that we'll use. Mandatory use, so automatically using an IQ measure or intellectual measure for any referral or multi-factor evaluation or reeval is not really consistent with best practices. Okay. Oftentimes it's not necessary to seek out an IQ score test. Other times it is, depending on what the situation might be. Okay. Um, Also looking at reporting, score reporting and interpretation must reflect known limitations of the test, including any type of inadequacy, any type of error measurement, or just basic general categories of the test. So again, there are multiple guidelines here. Again, you can go back and look at some of those, kind of study those in depth a little bit. I won't sit and read all those. So I mentioned the WISC-5. It's an intelligence scale. It's a very common IQ test. It's given. Okay. So it does provide a full IQ and processing score index. So we've got a mean that's 100, and then we have standard deviations of 15. Okay. I just contracted out about 2 months ago and gave this for a family that needed to get this for insurance related purposes for their child. They were attending a private school, was not able to get that type of testing done, and they specifically asked for a IQ, okay, for insurance purposes. Use the WIS-5. Here are some of the categories. Basically, four main categories with subtests. We have verbal comprehension index. Subtests are we're looking at similarities, vocab, comprehension, information, and word reasoning. And then we have a working memory index. So we have digit spans, letter number sequencing, and arithmetic. Then we have another area to focus on is perceptual reasoning. So we have block design. So I literally have blocks that's got color schemes and different designs, and they have to take those blocks and manipulate them to match the pictures on the easel that I'm showing them. Then we have another one is picture concepts, matrix reasoning, and then picture completion. The last area that we look at when doing IQ score on the WIS-5 is the processing speed. Okay. Coding. These are timed. They have to go in and perform these under time constraints. They have to go in and decode. They have a guide to go off of, and they have to change the code so that it'll give them a series of numbers. Each number represents a letter of the alphabet, so they have to decode it. Symbol search, and then also cancellation. Okay, so you can kind of see the areas that we do. Depending on the age of the student, guys, we divide that up. We don't do it in two settings. Or I'm sorry, we don't do it in one. We normally do it in about two settings due to the length of time it takes, and then also the younger the student, the easier they get tired during the testing. So to get a good reading, we often do it in multiple settings. Other popular intelligence tests are commonly used that maybe you have heard about in your district is the um, Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children, second edition, Stanford Binet, fifth edition, Woodcock Johnson Test of Cognitive Abilities, okay, WJ4 Cognitive. That gives us, instead of IQ, it gives us a GIA, General Intellectual Ability Score. Kaufman, KBI, is often referred to, the Kaufman Brief Intelligence Test. We do have some that are nonverbal IQ tests. Okay, we do have some of those. Uh, uh, Differential Ability Scale, the Universal Nonverbal Intelligence Test, Comprehensive Test of Nonverbal Intelligence, Test of Nonverbal Intelligence, and we have a Wechsler Nonverbal Scale of Ability. Now, kind of switching gears a little bit, we've covered the IQ part. Now we're going to talk just briefly about assessing adaptive behavior. On an initial assessment for to see if a student qualifies for special services, oftentimes you're going to be asked to complete an adaptive behavior scale. Okay, a very common one I often use is the Benlin 3. Okay, it's very comprehensive. It's lengthy. There's probably 100 items at least for parents or classroom teacher to answer and rate the student on. Okay, basic adaptive behavior describes how well that student adapts in their environment, whether it's at home, whether it's at school. Okay, must be considered when a person's being evaluated for ID. Still has the MR on there, but intellectual disability. For sure, we want to use adaptive. A student who functions within sub-average range of intelligence is measured by the IQ test, but who exhibits age-appropriate behavior outside the classroom on the score I get from this adaptive behavior, when we look at that and compare sub-average range of intelligence and they exhibit age-appropriate behavior outside the classroom and how they function based on that rating, shouldn't place them in a setting designed for intellectual disabilities. Okay, so we look at discrepancies from the adaptive and the IQ, and then also the subtest. Okay, if this adaptive was low, then you'd be looking at it a little bit different way at that. Okay, for placement. Also, adaptives are also a method of promoting non-biased assessment, especially when you're looking at cultural differences. They are designed to be answered by a person familiar with the student. Oftentimes, it's going to be a classroom teacher and then the parent. You have a parent edition and a teacher edition or version of it. The questions on there will elicit information about the student's independent functioning in and outside of school. Basically, it's measuring their self-reliance and daily living skills at home and then also out in public in the community. Okay, so some of you may have already had to do those. Some of you maybe haven't seen them yet. So here it gives different bullet points about research on adaptive. I'll point out a couple things to you, just kind of give you some ideas. There is a moderate relationship between adaptive behavior and intelligence. Okay, there is a moderate relationship. A lot of times, if the adaptive behavior is low, we're going to see a lower IQ score. Okay, that often goes hand in hand. There is also a moderate to moderately high relationship between different measures of adaptive behavior. The adaptive behavior is predictive of certain aspects of future vocational preferences. So it gives us an idea of the students' likes and dislikes as well. And based on their abilities, kind of predict maybe what their future vocation might be. Um, There are often differences between parents and teachers' ratings on the adaptive behaviors. Okay, that's not uncommon, but if you see a significant, huge difference, um, which I have, sometimes I do see that, and it oftentimes is the parent that is in complete denial that something's going on with their student. Okay, that's usually when we see it. So we'll see a significant difference in that adaptive scale. And then the next thing is when we start going through the comprehensive report, the numbers end up being low. And that's when it kind of hits home with the parent. But when they're filling out that questionnaire, a lot of times they just don't see it and accept the fact that there's something going on. So again, there's a lot of correlation with adaptive behaviors and then also that IQ. Okay. Assessing adaptive behaviors. We look at developmental appropriateness, we look at the cultural context, we look at situational and also generalized behavior, and then we look at the different domains that they're in. Uh, Definitions and measurement. When we score these are based on age, the culture, and the different situations. So as an examiner, we come in, I'm providing adaptives to you to complete. We need to be, or myself, I need to be cautious from the examiner side in selecting a scale that's appropriate for student needs. Okay. Some scales have already been normed, maybe using special populations only. Some are normed using both special and normal. Okay. There are some scales that contain items for assessing maladaptive behavior as well as adaptive behavior. So it just kind of depends on what the suspected disability might be. Again, I told you I use the Vinland. It's very comprehensive, so it covers a broad range of stuff. Okay, here are some common adaptive behavior skills that you might see at some point in time. I mentioned the Vinland. This slide deck's a little older. They've got the Vinland 3 now. This talks about the Vinland 2. So most of us use the Vinland 3. Then you have the AAMR, Adaptive Behavior Scale, and then you have the ABAS is also how we say the last one, Adaptive Behavior Assessment System. You often hear them say ABAS acronym, so you'll kind of know what they might be talking about when you hear ABAS. So kind of want to give you that broad overview of IQ, what it entails. So remember, we take IQ, the formula for that is, you guys remember what it is? Mental age divided by chronological age times 100, right? Easy way to figure it if you have to do it by hand. Most of the time, like I said, the software and everything does it for us. So, is there any questions over that before I switch off of the slide deck and get over to the syllabus and talking about the CBM and then also about the mock IEP? Well, everyone good? I'm going to go up, I'm going to pull the syllabus up so I can kind of go down and talk about a few things here and make sure everyone understands what we're going to be looking for on the CBM. And then I'm going to go ahead and give you some information on the mock IEP because everything is getting ready to come to the end in a hurry, right? We're almost there. Bear with me just a second. I'll get down. If you look, we're on week 6. This Sunday, remember, this Sunday, you do not have anything due. Last Wednesday, remember, it was that tipping point where we're talking about two things at the same time. And I was like, hey, I strongly encourage you to find that probe and go ahead and start collecting your data points and kind of spread it out. So you don't have anything due this Sunday, but the CBM will be due on the 11th, 1 week from Sunday. Okay, on the curriculum base. So I just want to remind everybody about that. You'll submit that on or before Sunday the 11th. And then remember, guys, that mock IEP is due on Wednesday, the 14th at 4. That is a very quick turnaround. Is everybody with me on that? It's all right here. Okay. You already have a lot of the data that you need. You're just basically waiting to get this CBM done so you can get your last little bit of data to have in front of you, and then you can sit down and record the mock IEP. Okay, I'm going to scroll on down and go over some of the different areas that we're going to be looking for when I score that CBM. So it's got the rubric down here, and I'm going to kind of touch base on it. And then I'm going to show you a couple things on the mock IEP really quick to kind of get you already thinking about that. Okay, so going back to our conversation last week, I went ahead and covered a little bit of this, but I'm going to kind of go back and review it. If you remember, we have a couple new areas on this assessment report compared to the normed reference and also compared to the informal. Okay, there were a couple new areas. One new section is going to be the probe and intervention. That's one of them. So we have our identifying information section to start your report. You're going to talk about the name of the CBM, the dates. You're going to have multiple dates, right? Because you administered that probe multiple times. You're going to talk about the skill that's being measured, kind of the purpose of it, why you selected that probe, and then the student, you're going to describe them. This part here, describing the student, their grade level, and their background, if it is the same student. Remember, you can use that same background information from your previous reports. Okay, so don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can use that same info. The next section is one of our new ones, probe and intervention. It's going to ask you to name and describe the probe. The probe is simply the assessment. Probe is just a new term we're using. We're going to describe that test or that probe, kind of the rationale for using that specific probe, kind of your reasoning for it. Describe the quantity and frequency of the probe. How long was it? How long did it take to do the probe? How many times did you administer that probe? Then just give a little description of it. What was it assessing? Just kind of describe a little bit of it. Describe the intervention that you used. If you had to put an intervention line in, if your data points dropped off, when I showed you the graph last week and you had to put in a little intervention, just briefly describe it. You maybe don't have an intervention. If you don't and your student progressively increased, just give a brief explanation. Due to the student performance, there was no intervention necessary at this time. If you did use an intervention, make sure you just give a little rationale for why you used it. And also, if you used it, talk a little bit about any type of modification you had to make to it. So, did you implement it and then turn around and have to modify it and give it again? So, that's what we're looking for on the probe and intervention. The next section, much like we've been doing, the test and results and interpretation section. A lot of it is going to be very similar to what you did in the normed reference and the informal, except for one new little chart that we're going to put in, and you're going to put in the chart that shows your data points with a baseline, an intervention line in there. If your data points dropped and you had to put an intervention, you're going to put an intervention line, but you also are going to have an aim line. Your projected um, um, pathway or track that the scores are going to fall. So you're actually going to put your aim line in there first and predict based off their baseline where you hope that student will score. Okay, and I'm going to show you that graph again that I showed you last week after we go over this syllabus. Okay, so make sure that you have data in tables, charts, and graphs. I should see two. You're going to have just a regular table in there that's got your raw data, and then you're going to have this second one that's got your data points with the baseline and intervention and your aim line. Okay? Guys, I want to point something out to you because it never fails. I'll have some of them that blow right over this, and I know I've mentioned this a couple times on this second line graph. Make sure you have that line graph. Look right here. I'm kind of putting my mouse cursor over it. That one thing alone, showing your baseline, intervention, and aim line, is worth 50 points. That one graph. Okay? Please don't overlook that. I got it right here. You can see it's right there laid out for you, okay? Make sure you provide an explanation of the results and refer to those tables, which you guys are used to doing that. Support any conclusions with data that you got from your CBM. Highlight what you felt like the strengths were and the weaknesses based on how they performed, which you've done that in the last two reports. The next section, you're used to doing this, recommendation and conclusion. You're just going to kind of highlight some instructional planning recommendations and talk about any modifications, anything like that. Okay. You've already been used to doing that. The second new section, you haven't had to do this in the norm reference or the informal. You're going to add a reflection section. Don't forget to do this, guys. Add the reflection section in there. This is based on your personal feeling on what you experienced from the CBM. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just giving your reflective thought on these items. We're asking you to explain at least 3 things that you learned about the CBM you administered. It's also asking you to discuss if you will use CBM again and why, and then support your stance with a couple pieces of data. Either you would or you wouldn't. If you won't, that's fine. Just explain why you wouldn't. Okay? Then in the last part of that, we're asking you to do is outline what you feel like are at least 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses of CBMs based on your experience administering the probes. What do you feel like overall are 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses of CBMs? Okay. And that will conclude your um, reflection section. Okay. Make sure that you include a copy of the parent permission form, just like you've done. Okay. And then you will go and pull up your a lesson plan template and do a lesson plan using the Fort Hays template we provided you using the CBM data, not data from the norm reference, not data from the informal, but data from the CBM. Okay. So remember, in this, we're adding 2 new sections. One of them's a reflection down here, and the other one is the probe and intervention section. 2 new sections, 1 additional new chart right here. This one here, a line graph that shows your data points with a baseline, an intervention line, and an aim line. And again, remember, guys, that one alone by itself is worth 50 points by itself. So don't forget to put that one in. Okay? Remember, if you need to look at this and to go back and just kind of check yourself, it is on the bottom part of page 22 in the course syllabus that's posted in the course shell, and then the pretty much most of page 23. So the bottom part of 22 and the 23, page 23, all of it. It will have the breakdown on what we're looking for, okay, to help guide you, make sure you covered your points. Any questions on that before I scroll down to the mock IEP?
There's an example of this also, right?
Yes, and after I go over the mock IEP, then I'm going to exit out of this and take you to the sample report that will show you. Okay. All right. I'm going to scroll down now. I'm going to kind of go over a few things to get you to thinking ahead a little bit. And I will cover it again. I will review it next week, but just so you kind of know and can have it in the back of your mind. We're going to talk just briefly about the mock IEP meeting. Okay. So you're going to have your information already. You've already got your informal. I've reviewed it, got it back to you. You're going to have the norm reference. Already got it back to you. Then after you turn the CBM in, I'll get it back to you. If you get it done before the deadline, you can submit it. I'll review it, score it, get it back to you. If you want to do it ahead of time, that's fine. Okay. I will be monitoring that all through that weekend, especially if they're coming in Saturday and all that, so I can get it back to you so I won't be holding you up in order to do your mock IEP. Okay. All right. This is something I often refer to help maybe guide you. I always tell everybody, hey, you might want to print it out, have it in front of you, in front of your computer as you're doing your mock IEP, and just kind of follow it right down the line here. Okay. These are the things right here that we are looking for. Okay. I just kind of highlighted it there. I'm going to take that off, but I just wanted to point it. So make sure you do an introduction to the meeting. You're going to pretend there is a full team there with you, Eileen. You're going to say, hey, good morning. I want to welcome everyone to Johnny Joe's IEP meeting. I want to start off with doing the introductions. Thank you, Mr. Smith, our building principal, uh, Mrs. Johnny Joe, Johnny's mama, and our regular ed teacher, Eileen Roth, and Mr. Smith, the building principal. The purpose of the meeting today is I've been doing some assessments, collecting data on Johnny's performance to determine whether, we need to proceed with testing. And I'm going to, talk about some of the assessments. The first one I want to start off with is informal assessment. And then we're going to talk about kind of how they perform, their present level of performance and how they progressed. We'll explain our data for the informal. Then we'll go back, we'll name the norm reference, we'll explain our data, we'll go back, name our CBM probe, explain the data. Also, in that meeting, if you remember, a few weeks ago, I kind of was giving you guys a little bit of a heads up. We're going to ask you to show or present evidence of student performance using those tables, charts, or graphs. If you feel comfortable doing screen shares and having those charts up where you can just share them, kind of like I'm sharing my screen with you right now, that's one way to do it. If you don't feel comfortable with technology and switching the screens and having the charts and graphs up, you can literally have hard copies, hold it up in front of the screen and point to it as you're explaining the data, just like I'm kind of doing now. Okay, doing that. That is acceptable. Okay, if you need to do it. I just need to see either a screen share or you holding it up as if you're explaining the data on the charts. Okay, you've already created them. They're in your reports, right? You've already got them. So, so just make sure you have that. Again, it's that visual representation to help that parent see um, the scores in graph or chart or table form. It helps them kind of connect the dots. Okay. So that's one way. Presenting evidence of student performance in the format of tables, charts, or graphs. Just talked about that. Then after you do that, we're going to ask you to present or explain what you feel like are three of your case study student strengths. Okay, just any three what you feel like are strengths. Then we're going to ask you to present to the team what you feel like are three areas that are weak areas or areas in need of improvement. Okay. Then as the meeting's progressing along, after you do that, we're going to ask you to outline or present based on all the data you collected, two short-term SMART goals, and then two long-term SMART goals. So depending on if where we're at in the semester, I always tell the graduate students, hey, on a short term, let's just consider it a quarter, a 9 week. A long term would be a go from the time we're having the meeting until the end of the school year or midterm, depending on where you're at in the school year. Okay, at least a semester, if not two, or when you would have your annual meeting. Okay, so we're just hypothetically, we're going to just visualize it. It's 9 weeks and the end of the year for them to work towards. And then as you're wrapping up and getting ready to conclude, just offer some expectations to the parent or the guardian on what they can do to help support you as the resource teacher and the classroom teacher accomplish those goals. What are some things? It could be something as simple as sitting down at night and reading 15 to 20 minutes with their child, or reviewing multiplication facts for 15 minutes every night. It could be something as simple as that, working together. After you express those expectations or what you would like to see them do to help to kind of work together, and just say, hey, in conclusion, I really appreciate your time today coming in to meet with us to go over this data. And I look forward to seeing the results we get with what we're asking you to do at home, mom, dad, and what we'll do here, and us working together and supporting each other, and then coming back to review and see the progress that Johnny's made. Okay, and then that concludes it. These are the areas, if you follow this format right here, from the introduction down to the conclusion, and just have that kind of in front of you and just kind of watch and make sure you're covering all those areas, you're going to be fine. Okay. The main thing, really, one of the big things I'm looking for, because you've already done all the assessments and you've got the data. So in this video, really, guys, I'm really focusing in on the presentation. Confidence, being able to explain the data. You've already got it. You've been immersed in it all during these 8 weeks, this class. Just being able to relay that information to the parent in the flow of the meeting, being prepared and being able to flow right through that meeting. I tell every class this as an administrator coming in to sit in an IEP meeting. There's nothing worse than coming in and your special ed teacher is not prepared and they're fumbling around. You can tell they're disorganized, everything's shoveled around on their desk. And I always say, my question to you is, imagine if you were the parent sitting on the other side of the table. Where would your confidence be in that teacher, just on basing on that observation of seeing how disorganized they were? Okay. So I'm looking for the flow of the meeting and being able to present it in a confident manner. Okay. That's what I'm focusing in on for this. Right. Any questions on that? I will go over that again. I just kind of wanted to touch base on it tonight to get you to thinking about it, but I will cover it again next week.
On the part that says encourage questions or input, you just
Yeah.
want us to pretend like we're
Just pretend,
asking
say,
that?
hey, as we get ready and conclude the meeting, do any of you have any questions of me and the information I presented? You just may sit there for 2 or 3 seconds, say, if not, thank you guys again for coming in, move on. Okay? So that's literally how you cover that part. All right? Quickly, before we end, I'm going to back out of this. I'm going to go to sample reports and I'm going to show you again where the sample of the CBM is to help you as if you need it as a reference, and then also show you um, the sample chart. Let me go back up to 805 resourcing and get down to my sample reports, CBM. Okay. Okay, here's the sample CBM report I got in. You again, you're gonna see identifying information, just like what you're used to doing. The new section is probe and intervention, test results and interpretation. Here's where I'm wanting to show you the chart. Here is showing basically the raw data. You guys are used to doing that. So you'll have a chart like this. Here's the new chart that I showed you last week. Remember, these dots are the data points that they administer the probe. You can see they just have a timeline with dates down here. There are more data points on this one compared to what I asked you to get because this was when we were doing the full 16-week class. Okay, so but this report was well laid out, so I used it as an example. Here's the data points. You can see after the on the third probe, it dropped. Here's their intervention line. They stopped from August the 30th through September the 4th. They did an intervention. They came back on the 4th. They gave a probe, another probe. So we're seeing, you can see after their intervention, Terry, they put in this orange line. That was their aim line. That was their prediction on how they were going to score. And you can see their data points pretty much followed that right with the aim line.
On mine, I did this already, but I don't have, oh, you can't see what I'm doing. I don't have the line in the middle. I just have the space between. Do
Yeah.
you want me to add the line between, or is it okay
Yeah.
to leave the space?
This right here, if you can get a line in there, yeah, and just
Okay,
yeah, you can just put intervention.
okay.
Yeah. So that's what it looks like. So remember, this is in 805 resources. Go down to sample reports, and then you'll see informal, norm referenced, and CBM. Okay.
But if our student maybe didn't start out very high, but keeps making progress, then there won't be an
There
intervention
won't
in the
be.
same line.
That's exactly right. And you'll need to explain that up here in the narrative, which I mentioned that while ago. Your student may, even though they may start off low, every probe is continuously moving upward. And so they're progressing. Where the intervention line comes in is when you see drops right here at the beginning. It's time to do an intervention. If they start off, let's say, Eileen, you said it maybe started off low, but they're consistently going upward, you wouldn't need to do an intervention line. It's when you have the drop.
If
Okay.
they're stagnant, like if every time they get the same score, do you also do an
I
intervention?
would do an intervention. Yeah. If you see it after about the third probe and it's the same, I would do an intervention. And you can see here, they did it for a week. They did an intervention, then they came back. If you do that, hopefully you see it go upward. If you're seeing that stagnant, you're telling them that's at a level that's at their frustration level. They're not making gains. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? No, I kind of covered a wide variety of stuff, but I will come back to the mock IEP information I just went over next week on Wednesday. We'll talk about it. I'll take questions from you on the CBN because you'll be getting closer to that due date on the CBN, but we'll talk a little bit about um, the mock IEP. I'll give you some suggestions too on different formats you could use. A lot of people that turn it in use Zoom because they're used to using Zoom so much. Okay. I've had different ones use Google Meet. Okay. Another thing to think about, depending on how comfortable you are with technology, I've had them go and create a PowerPoint with all the areas. Each slide covered an area of that outline, and one slide might have been their charts, tables, and graphs for the informal. And they just built slides, and they use that slide to guide their meeting. Okay, so that slide deck with all the multiple slides had all the different information that had their tables, charts, and graphs on it, and they just used that PowerPoint slide to guide their whole IEP meeting. That's acceptable to do that if you choose to. All right, any questions on
How
that?
how long is the meeting?
Okay, so in order to cover all that information, I always tell everyone it takes anywhere from 9 to 12 minutes to do it. That's the average range. Some might be a little bit longer, but if you're going less than that, it is difficult to get all that in less than about 9 minutes. It just is. I always tell everybody 9 to 12 is an average range. Okay. Also, I'll talk to you a little bit next week because sometimes we get into those video files can be large sometimes. And so I'll kind of, and I can walk you through it. And I don't know how tech savvy some of you guys are comfortable, but a lot of times, like, and I do it for all of our classes, I will download the Zoom recording into a file on my desktop, then I upload it into YouTube, create a YouTube video, and it shrinks the size. It compresses that file, is what it does. And so I upload it onto my YouTube page and it creates a YouTube link. And then I just go and drop it into the announcements section and post it on Blackboard. It condenses that file. If you don't condense it and then you just try to upload it straight into Blackboard to submit it, that wheel may just sit there and spin for 10 minutes. And you think, oh man, I don't know if that uploaded correctly. Okay. So I'll show you. It's about 3 clicks of a mouse and you're done. To upload it into YouTube and do that. So again, I can walk through it next week to kind of show you. You may have another format that you like to use and prefer, and that's fine. Okay. Any questions before we go? Covered a lot of information in about 55 minutes. Okay, so remember we have CBM, you don't have anything due this Sunday. Nothing due this Sunday. It's due on the 11th. Remember, Sunday the 11th, you have the CBM that's due, and then the 14th, the mock IEP. So it's a quick turnaround. If you get your CBM done, you want to submit it. I check Blackboard every day, check it when I do my emails. I look at it in the morning, I look at it in the afternoon. If I see it on there, I'll go ahead and score it, get it back to you so you can go ahead and start on that IEP if you want, on the mock IEP. You'll have your CBM data. Okay? Any questions? Everybody's like, I'm just ready to get this over. All right. Hey, if you do think of anything, just please email if you have any questions. And again, check them early in the morning and then in the evening as well. So, and I'll download this and get it posted in Blackboard here in the next hour or so. Okay. All right. If nothing else, I'll let you guys go. I appreciate it. You guys have a good rest of your evening and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys. Make sure everyone's signed in so I can get your points to you. Okay. So make sure you got it in the chat box.
Thank
Being rec-
you.
Thank you. You guys have a good evening.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.